So good. We're connecting again for all kinds of cool stuff today, and maybe it's worth maybe Dustin, it's worth mentioning to the people who might be watching this is that we do sometimes have these preamble type conversations because there are some things that are probably of such deep personal nature that they're not necessarily things that we're ready for you to share with, or for that matter, anything I might share with the world. We already are going to have to go back to some recordings and take some names out, just because some people's stories aren't ours to share.
I mean, really, honestly, I thought talking about my hemorrhoids was something that I could. I didn't realize that was private. I shouldn't mention it.
Anyway,
Shit, I did it again.
Yeah, and if you want to pick nose on camera again, you can do that too.
I did. I
no,
I know I blew my nose.
I'm just kidding, of course. So made me laugh. I don't laugh that easily. I mean, I love to laugh, and I laugh quite a bit through my life, but I think the threshold for what makes me laugh is very high. So good job.
It's just part of my coaching technique.
So what's been going on here? What do we have? What do we?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say homework. Very easy. My friend, he said he would be down for it, and he would even, I believe he said he'd be totally okay with if we recorded it.
Okay. Now, if you remember when you and I were having conversations back in 2018, we were recording those. All those have been dumped by now, although there may have been, well, not actually all of them. If once in a while I see your name crosses my radar. So if you ever want to see one of the older recordings, I can probably put that in there. But the primary benefit to recording, from my perspective, is it gives you something to go back to. If you think about something, you go, I didn't address whatever that was with, and here you're going to be having somebody who's acting and may very well benefit from you doing their coaching. And you may want to go back and go, I just picked up on something that I thought about a day later, and I went back and listened to it, and you can go, oh, that's something for us to focus on.
Right.
You know, and after a while you get to a point where it won't be a day later that you see these things. Like yesterday, I had a very long second session with a new client, and we were doing, now that client's already some people call themselves healers. I prefer the term light worker, just because everything is energy, and light is a form of energy. And then the idea is that we technically aren't the healers. We're putting a light on healing. And so the healing is actually done by the individual we're guiding. We're guiding them through the process. They're the ones who are healing. They're the ones who are doing their own healing. There may be people who have the ideas that they can touch something and healing will take place at that point of touch. And it doesn't have to be physical touch. It could be an emotional touch, or whatever the case may be. I think that those people are still, in many ways, they're just conduits. They're not themselves doing the healing. They're just channels for the energy.
They're in the flow. I feel like that's when the universe is working through them.
Yep.
That's how it is when I'm writing.
Right. So that's why I use the term light worker for even coaches who are doing a different kind of healing, or guiding for a different kind of healing, because coaches in and of themselves are usually broad. In good coaches are broader in what they're able to do. So they might know something about Reiki. They might know something about chakras. They might know something about the human condition at a mechanical level, or an educational level. Like maybe they're doctors in the MD form, and maybe they're doctors as naturopaths, or maybe they're psychologists or licensed social workers, or whatever the case may be. So everybody's got these different shingles and trainings that they'll bring with them. That doesn't necessarily make them a light worker, or that can connect them to light working energy.
Okay.
So, and a light worker is very much more conscientious about the fact that there is, in many cases, you could even argue, and as much as I would like to say there is science behind everything I talk about, I've gotten to the point where no matter how scientific I can be about so many things, and I could really dive deep into making scientific connections to the things we talk about,
Right.
including, although I don't really do the math, I'm very, very, very involved in a lot of deep learning on things like quantum physics, loop gravity, quantum field theory, quantum mechanics, theory of relativity, like general and specific. Excuse me. So,
Can go ahead. I'm sorry.
so I just want to say is that, so yesterday I had session 2. So I have a tendency to do long circles, right? So yesterday I had session 2 with somebody who is a light worker. And during the course of that conversation, you remember there's a kind of a digging for gems type of thing. Do you remember when we were doing that 4 years ago or so? Maybe vaguely, where we would say, let's just, I'm going to say that I'll say, self-worth might have been is a very common thing in people's journey. So you can say, well, when you feel unworthy, what is that connected to, or what else do you feel? And then they would go to another thing, and what you're really doing is you're almost mining for gems. And then what these gems are the things that we can help them with, we can use as focus for helping them reframe their journeys without those things standing in their path. I mean, that's the gist of it. Many, if not most, I'm gonna have to go get some water in a second.
That's all right, I'll get some too.
Many, if not most, of us, our journeys into our adulthood have these limitations that were imposed upon us. I call them, in many cases, I'll call them like a button that's installed by parents and teachers and possibly even peer experiences. Not all buttons. In fact, the more and more I do this, the more personal data I can collect. So as I was talking about the scientific pieces, I'm now also allowing personal data, which is not scientific and subject to personal interpretation. Although I'm trusting my relationship with the universe to kind of guide me on how to sort all of that out. And one of the things I do to keep sorting it, just as a side note, is there are light workers who are ungrounded. That means to me that they have enough fear-based posture that they are now getting involved in fear-based activities. Some of it political, whatever the case may be.
Okay.
So when you're doing the sorting of personal data, don't let fear-based sorting guide you. Let love-based sorting guide you. So what you're doing is just saying, that makes sense, I can serve with that. That makes no sense. That personal data, that's an obstacle to being a good coach, or that's an obstacle to my own personal development, or whatever the case may be. So you're doing that kind of sorting. So yesterday, and I'm going to finish this in a second, I was working with, as I said, session 2 with somebody who's a light worker. Can you see me now? Because you blipped for a second. Okay.
Yeah, it did it here too.
So, so I was working in session 2 with somebody who is a light worker and fairly well grounded. And we all are works in progress. So it's good that if we can coach each other, or we get coaches. Like I'm in between coaches right now. I will have to eventually, part of it's just, I'm so busy. I haven't even begun to look. I don't even know who I want to work with next. So anyway, when we were doing that mining thing, we ended up coming back up into the daylight. We weren't getting to those things that were challenging that person's journey. We were getting to the point where, like, and what it was is that person knows as a light worker that the goal in life is to get to the light. So we would steer back to that as we were doing that kind of mining I was describing. And so I wanted to, one of the reasons for recordings is very good is so that you can see things like bypass energy, because that's one of the things that's really huge. People will bypass those uncomfortable points in their journey that are the very reasons why they need to do this kind of work, but they will bypass it. They'll step around it. And you may not see it right away when you're first coaching. And then, but as you get better at this, recordings aren't going to be assessed. It'll be more for your client than it is for you. So they can see what they did.
Well, I mean, yeah. And that, do you want to grab a glass of water? I'll get a glass.
Yeah, let me go
of
get
water.
that. I'm going to just pause this for a second.
Let's pause it.
I'll be right back. So we're back. So anyway, all that long chat was just to kind of say this, that initially the recordings will be for you. In the end, the recordings will be for them to see some of the things that you'll recognize right away. And there are, coaching is all about providing the guidance from your own journey or training. I like to say this as I've had 6 decades of research in the human condition. So which includes certifications where you need them and things like that. And I never use I have a life coach shingle. I never use that. I never talk about it because so many coaches are out there they have more challenges than the clients they purport to serve.
Right.
And I don't want to make that sound judgmental. It's just that if you've got that much wrong in your own life and you have still got challenges learning from your own journey, it may very well be that you have some experience in terms of being able to share something with people who are you're guiding. It's kind of like this. In order to coach, you only need to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the person you're guiding.
Right.
They can't be 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, though. That makes no sense. So,
or unless it's a subject matter thing. But
well, it could be. I mean, they might know more about auto repair than I will ever know, but I'm talking about the actual journeying of our lives.
Right.
They have to be able to. And then the other thing is that we, in many ways, will be conduits from what many people will call the source. So sometimes we will see something and say something that would not have normally come from us, as long as we're ready to be there to pass that through. I think you just mentioned it before, is when you're writing, the ideas that come through you, sometimes, and I know this happens for me, sometimes when I write, I surprise myself for what comes out on paper, and
yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's almost like intention and attention and the posture of serving is all you really need to do in order to serve, because stuff will come to you.
That makes sense. I mean, my father is one of the least spiritual people I know. And even when he was describing his art, I mean, he had no idea what he was describing, but he was like, when I'm doing my art, it's almost like I'm not doing it. Like something takes over me. And and I was like, well, that's, I was like, that's the universe working through you. And I mean, that as soon as I said something like that, he was just poo-pooing on it. But he's an artist. Like, he's this incredible artist. And he's like, it's coming from somewhere. It's like, it's not coming from me.
It's really weird. But if you don't mind my inserting this thing, is technically it is from you, because again, personal data says this, is that, and this will offend people who are deeply religious from a religious dogmatic approach, but not necessarily it should be offensive to them, but because of the way they practice their religion is that the otherism of this deity that's in their journey is something separate from, and I look at the fact that we are, and even though, for example, in the New Testament, the Bible says we are created in the image of God, what that tells me is that we actually have this direct overlap between us as individuals and God, or the universe, or the source, or the force, or pick a name. So inside of this thing is that, like, using your dad as an example, is that he may not really be paying attention to it the way you and I might talk about it. You're saying he was channeling all this stuff from the universe, but he is the universe at the same time.
Yeah.
So when he says he doesn't know where it's coming from, he's right. And just like when you write, you may not always know where that idea came from, but it did come.
Well, and yeah.
And then that's creativity.
Well, yeah.
And then just to kind of add to the pile of confusion here is that you got philosophers in our society like Sam Harris. I don't know if you know Sam Harris or not, but Sam Harris has this repeatedly goes through this narrative is that we have no, I want to use it exactly the way he says it. So we have no, we can't, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. This idea is that we have no real control over what we think or do.
Right.
That there is, we are kind of subject to the whims of our programming, and things like that. And so, and I kind of understand where he's coming from, because there are so many things that we could be actually in motion doing things before we're even aware why we're doing it.
Yeah.
So, and he's identifying and again, from a personal data perspective, it kind of gives me a little bit more food for thought in terms of saying, well, that's why I, perhaps whether it's our creativity or our, or, we're in the midst of a conversation with an exchange of some kind, that maybe the ideas aren't completely mine. Maybe it's this blending of energy from the universe and me and everything like that. And that when I come up with an idea that surprises me, it could very well be that it's because of that blending thing that we just talked about.
So, yeah. Can I say something now?
No. Yeah, of course you can.
So that just brings to mind, like you said, my dad is the universe, and it's, it's something. The way I look at it is that if it's a blending, it's kind of like, yes, we are all, whether we like it or not, we are all part of it. We're not separate from it. And therefore, it's going to work through us. That's what we're here for. The part that denies it, or doesn't believe in it, or, as this guy said, we are not in control of like what we think or do, or whatever he said, however he said it, the paraphrasing. Yeah, so there's the lack of control in the sense that the universe is just going to do what it's going to do, but we also have that part of us that we can see our ingrained patterns and habitual forms of thought, and consciously make a decision and rewire those neurons in our brain. Mm-hmm. And then going back to what I was saying, so we can make a shift, we can change, we can learn new things. It's the whole idea of the growth mindset versus the what is it, the other the stuck mindset, I guess. But those people who poo-poo on it and deny it and whatever. That's a programming. That's an environmental thing. That's how they may have been brought up. It may be whatever's been passed down. But nevertheless, it's like it's still going to do what it needs to do through you and through each one of us. And so yeah, that's just kind of my thought on the whole thing. And yeah, anyway, I mean, and then I was going to mention one other thing, unless you wanted to say something else. Just,
you know, I don't like to talk, right?
You know, in coaching, the whole point is to let the client be the talker.
Not necessarily. That's talk therapy.
Wow.
Which is a slow ass way to learn.
Yeah, probably. I just wanted to mention, you said the earlier when you were talking, just something you reminded me of, kind of the whole science versus, I don't want to say religion, but science versus spirituality. I mean, obviously that's a big thing that's changing. Like they're now seeing how the two are linked. And I mean, you get that with like the like that one movie that came out 20 years ago or whatever, like What the Bleep Do We Know and whatever. But there was that's nothing really new. It just reminded me of these books, and there were 3 of them that were all kind of along the same genre or idea concept. And I can't for the life of me remember what the third one was. And that's probably the one I didn't read, but I read the other 2. And one of them was The Cosmic Code, which is all about like metaphysics and like all about physics and spirituality. And then the other one was The Dancing Wu Li Masters. And those are older books. Those are, I think, probably from the 70s or whatnot. But I do remember that it's that combination where it's like they're not 2 separate things. But that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can get real heady on these things as are we avatars? Are we are we distinct and separate beings? Is the universe what we know as the heavens, or is there something different than this that's called heaven? There's so many things that as what we can call the cosmic fabric while we're sitting in our chair like this might be our understanding about how what little we have to understand about how cosmology works and things like that. Yet maybe the cosmic fabric from a soul perspective is something completely different. So language may serve us at times, and there may be times when we're just at a loss, going back to,
Yeah.
Going back to Sam Harris, we have no free thought, yet we have all these conversations, so,
right. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of like, do we have free will, or does everything happen for a reason? Like, I mean, that could even be used as an excuse. Well, it happened for a reason. Well, that's my excuse for not wanting to change.
Well, and there's something to be said for that. Although Sam Harris never sits back and goes, well, I'm not going to do anything. And he doesn't advise that or other people, because he said, if you want to be happy, you still need to be in motion. You have to still be going through your life, and you still need to be, even having aha moments, even if free will is, from his perspective, something that, we're sort of a product of impulses. And I'm really not doing a good job of explaining Sam Harris.
It's okay. I mean, it makes for an interesting conversation.
But the idea is he's absolutely certain that free will, I mean, he speaks frequently about the ideas is that how we behave is, it's almost like we think about what we're doing after we're already doing it, whatever that is. And so it's not so much it's predestined, but whatever we're doing is, even if the universe is completely acting at random, or what's going on around us is kind of all this random of us all bumping into each other. He's saying our responses to these things, our reactions to these things, are so automated that there's no free will. And I really don't have a good argument against his perspective, because I think there's so many things we do that are indeed, like having an idea is like, I don't know where that idea came from, so it kind of like maybe bolsters what he's saying in many, many ways. Okay, so however we're supposed to be journeying through here, we still can learn. We can still have moments of joy. We can still define what our journey should be like, and how, what brings us happiness, and how much happiness on a scale, happiness set point maybe is the better way to talk about it, because you can't always be happy. But let's just say I could be kind of an Eeyore, and I can always be going, oh, the rain is coming again, or I can be kind of like, oh, the sun is out again, and I'm just always looking for sunny moments over here, and somebody else is always looking for the darker moments over there. Maybe we don't have that much control over how we from moment to moment engage those things, yet we can overall start to change where we want our set points to be.
Oh, it's just, like the whole that whole idea of God, the Winnie the Pooh. I mean, it brings up a lot of stuff in my mind.
Actually, Winnie Pooh is an extremely interesting storyline when it talks about certain levels, and characters inside of that have like abounding optimism, like Tigger.
Yeah,
and then and then you have other characters like Eeyore is always like, it's a rainy day no matter where you are, type of thing. And then you got the happy-go-lucky Pooh, and you got Piglet the curious, and and I'm drawing on memories that I haven't had in 55 years. So it's like, ooh, okay, what else do I know about these characters? Not much. I guess Christopher Robin, that's the other name I know.
No, there's also, and I think, like, I was like thinking about like, what characters am I? And I don't know who it is, but I know that there's Rabbit, and I think I have to see what I think. They're like all a different personality now that it makes sense to me. But a very sad story I just want to mention, completely has nothing to do with this conversation, and maybe we can talk about what we were talking about before recording. But I was listening to a talk, really incredible talk, and it was Timothy Ferriss. You can look it up on YouTube. It's Timothy Ferriss interviewing Gabor Maté, I think is his name.
Okay, and he
Gabor
is
Maté. Yeah,
Gabor, and he has a very, very powerful human condition interpretation that I think is worth honoring. There, I mean, he speaks specifically about depression and those kinds of energies, and what kind of makes those things become compositions of our life. And I can't say that I've modeled any of my work after him, but when I've seen what Gabor Maté is talking about, is I go, yeah, I don't do it the same way, but I agree with what he's saying, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And he was like talking about like books that, I don't know what the question was, but maybe I know there was a question about books that really are worth mentioning. But he talked about like the author of Winnie the Pooh, and how, and it was so sad to me. It's like he was so obsessed with his stories and writing his stories and his work, and he's like writing these children's stories, and these characters, and his obsession with that made it so he often gave no attention to his own son, his own child, and his own child was like left almost like without any sort of like parental fatherly like love or attention that he needed. And I was like, my God, I mean, I feel like that's the case that happened to me. And I feel like that could so easily be done with how I get myself into go, do it mode, and cannot like just take a fucking breath and take a step back and spend 5 minutes with my son, like figuring out something. And so, I mean, this kind of segues into.
Yeah, I think was the author A.A. Milne. I can't remember who the author was for.
I don't remember.
I
could probably.
I'll look that up while we're talking. But
I've got like I could go and look at my Winnie the Pooh collection for my son. So, should I start talking about what we talked about?
Well, before we do that, I was just going to say something that that it's A.A. Milne. The when you describe the fact that he was so committed to his characters, but wasn't really there to be an engaged parent.
Right.
And I don't know what the story of his son is, whether, and his son might have been a complete lunatic. He's entirely, I'm going to put that in quotes, lunatic, because I don't want to use the word aspersion by judgment. I just want to sort of say assessment. We don't know what his journey was. I don't know anything about his son, but first I even knew about this particular scenario where he showed up in that way. But I do want to point out is that so many times what we do is whether we're workaholics or we're dedicated or we're frenetically working on a to-do list, or at least sometimes those are, and many times those aren't just getting things done. Those are medicating things.
But in my case, and I just want to say this without going into it yet, what is it medicating? That is
but there are
awesome thing what you just said, because
in broad strokes, I see there's two kinds of medication, one that supports healing and one that supports coping.
And well, can I just say that my medicating, my checking it off my to-do list, I think it's supporting the very thing, the very habit that I'm actually trying to get away from. So I think like when you say medicating, it's almost like, I think we have to be careful with that idea of medicating, because I may be supporting and medicating something that's unhealthy for me and the people around me. And I think that has a lot. I think it really plays into like what we talked about, like what I'm dealing with. Like,
well, I'll even, if I could add, is medicating to cope is a place that limits development. It's more of a stuck position.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's possible that we could be doing something you could even argue it's medication to survive or medication to thrive. And so many of us medicate to survive, whether it's just the moment or survive ourselves or survive a relationship issue. And in actually knowing that just about everything we do has a form of medicating property, we sit there and maybe we do. I used to have these things I used to call mental health days. I just that day could not function. There was just something about my energy. It was off. And so I would just park in front of the TV for the day or something like that.
Isn't that called a hangover?
I don't drink that much. Maybe it's another kind. Maybe it's a spiritual hangover, or maybe it's a human intensity hangover. I don't know. But there are just I haven't had them in a while. Of course, I had different things where I may have had entire days going offline because I was going through some medical healing. But it's just, what I would just sort of, the idea is that our activities can serve us in two ways. It can be that which feeds us, let's just say they're focuses of sorts. The focuses can put us, we've done the left hand, right hand thing, right? Where like love and deservingness and all the things we want, and beauty and all that over here. And then what I don't want, and fear and all those other things over here. What you focus on, you get more of.
Right.
So
Right.
one of the challenges with coping-based medications is that we're not healing. And when we heal, we need less coping-based medications. So the question is where are we putting our energy into things? I didn't, like earlier you described yourself as a type A. That's not a thing I would have ever defined for you.
Right.
Or maybe you were saying your ex-wife would say you were type A.
Well, and well, can I talk about? Can we get into it?
Sure.
Yeah. So basically, before, when Brian and I were having our little pre-meeting, I think this is great because this is a real opportunity. You guys can see some real coaching right now, because I'm stuck with something, and I know I know enough that to understand that I am completely responsible in this, or to at least take full responsibility for myself and the change that I would like to see within myself. And I also know that it can be done. I also know that being in a place where I feel stuck is I don't have to be there. I don't this is I know that I'm totally adopting the growth mindset in this, where I'm gonna get through this, and hopefully gracefully.
Even if not, who cares?
Yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I mean, and even as I'm saying all of this, it really goes into this preemptive kind of talk, kind of goes into the issue that I want to bring up, that I am struggling with. And it's the idea of that I'm sure it's based in fear, because I feel as though I have to control everything that's happening around me. Now, not necessarily like a control freak, like, hey, don't do that. It's not, but there's this level of controlling myself, controlling my surroundings, this intensity that I function within. And then the way I function is, and that's where the type A thing comes from. The way I function is I kind of live within this constant, like, urgency and anxiety, and constantly feeling overwhelmed, like something new. I've got to do this thing, and oh my God. And so it becomes very like, I become this verbal processor, and what is happening is that energy, that intensity, that all of what I just mentioned is affecting myself, obviously, and it's affecting the people around me. And it's definitely something that needs to I mean, it's being seen, but it's something that I want to start to get, not control. I don't want to, like, that's the thing. I want to get a hold on it, but in a way where there's this awareness of it, and like, it doesn't come into my coaching work. It doesn't come into my parenting. It doesn't come into my relationships. And so that's where I'm at. I mean, there's 1,000 million examples I can give of that, but it just so happened that there were two things that happened this past week that really brought that back to light for me. And yeah, I would like to not I would like to not be the stress case that I am. And yeah, so we're talking about control,
Right. Well,
stress, anxiety.
what do you think we're going to just only have today. We'll do an intellectualization of this discussion. There may be something where we can actually do some modality work that will cement the kind of learning that will work for this. But and ultimately, as I say, from an intellectual perspective, if I asked you to and by the way, just for the people who are listening, modalities is I'm a hypnotherapist by training. I have other things like neurolinguistic programming. I can fuss around with EFT and some other sensory based. In fact, even in NLP, there are sensory things that that can be used as modality functions. I tend to focus on the language and the verbal side of things because I think that's the most effective for the most people, at least. And so inside of what we're doing here is to intellectualize this part of the discussion is that what would be the ultimate form of control?
What would be the ultimate form of control? That is I'm not even sure what you mean by that. Like
it was more of a provocative question. This is the idea is if I told you that you were free to do anything you want.
Okay.
So you had freedom. You weren't bound to anything. You were unbounded.
Yeah.
What would that mean to control? Would you have the most control ever or the least control ever, or by virtue of having no control, have more control?
Okay. So let me think this through. So if I was unbounded entirely, I could do whatever I wanted. Would I have control or wouldn't I? Or would it be some sort of a combination? I would say that it's obviously a combination in the sense that I would have total freedom, and therefore, like, I think the control part is that I'm in control. Like I've been given control in the sense that I don't have to necessarily worry about the control of others or other things, like the control of not having enough money, the control of having to show up to a job, the control of having to be a good parent or I don't like.
Well, it's like this is if you didn't have that to-do list challenge.
Right. Oh, did we mention that checking things? Yeah, we did. Okay.
Yeah. So if you didn't have that checking things off a list thing, which in some ways you medicate with, and in other ways, it's a kind of like, I only have so much time in the day and I need to control things so I have peace of mind. So, so what we do is we control things to feel as much peace as we can. And what I'm only just illustrating is the possibility that if we no longer need to control things, we have more peace.
Well, that's yeah, what I was getting to. It's like there would be the lack of control. I would have control over those things that control me, because I would be able to be like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not worried about that. Right. You're not going to get me. That's the control I'm talking about. The rest is freedom. It's peace. I can be and do whatever I want to. So if I want to, wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and just write for 5 hours, I can do that. If I want to, pick my son up and say, hey, dude, we're going to Disneyland today, whatever, it's just, there's that freedom like that. And there's that lack of stress about like, oh, like I'm not broke. I am not unhealthy. I double negative. I am healthy. I am free. I am able to do whatever I want. And so there's some level of me that doesn't feel that, obviously. And some level of me that's like, I got to get all these things done. I got to do this. And that's where the urgency and the overwhelm, like there's the overwhelm, and then there's the urgency and the franticness and the sending a text to somebody saying, hey, I need the blah, 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 which makes them jump, which if some people be like, well, yeah, I'll get to it when I can. Like I have these friends that are just, you text them, you might hear from them in a day or two.
Mm-hmm. I think you kind of got me in that a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And there's
because
a varying
you know, we
degrees.
talked about sharing my small 5x7 piece of green screen. I'll just send it to you. It took me like a week and a half to get it off the screen from
Believe
behind me
me.
because I'm busy doing other things. I'm going, you'll get it soon enough.
I have people that are so much, even way like that's like nothing. And the way you react, but whereas I am, I'm like, you text me, I'm on it. I'm on it. It's like, I better respond to this person or they're gonna blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, anyway, so I'm gonna, here's an example. I have a friend, and I've mentioned before, but I just as an example, it's not important who she is, but I happen to see her.
It's important to you. Let's not.
Well, yeah, but I happen to see her phone. This is not a person who responds right away to texts.
Right.
Okay. I saw her phone, and I was, I mean, who I am.
Did she have all? She has a lot of little blue spots next to her text messages.
Yeah, yeah. So it almost brought like a fear of heights or whatever, you know. I was like horrified when I saw her phone, because, and this is not a fucking exaggeration, she had over 60,000 unread emails in her Gmail.
Oh, okay.
I think I said, like, you have like 50,000 unread emails, and she's like, no, it's like 65,000. How is that even fucking possible? 65,000, not 6,500.
46,981 in my Outlook. Unread.
Jesus Christ.
And
like my emails, like, I put them in labels. I delete it if it's not necessary. I unsubscribe if it's not necessary.
I don't have time. I do not want to
fucking red dots by my text.
I don't want to give time to unsubscribing. I don't want to. I don't even want to delete. I don't let myself get in it, because there are people who are. I watch. The people who can't have a piece of paper out. They can't have an inbox at the end of the day. The inbox has to be taken care of. And they get into a boil when it's like, I don't want to be subscribing to this. What is saying, you know? And it's like, and I'm not saying you get into a boil. It's just that it's just like, I want my energy to be that of free. So I don't allow the outside influences of other people marketing to me. And every once in a while I might open an email that's marketing to me because I want to see how they're marketing. I don't give a crap what they're marketing. I just want to know how they're marketing. We go, oh, that's clever. And maybe I'll learn something about how they market that I want to retain for future use.
You just said something. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Well, I mean, the gist of that is that I think I might call it, I untether myself from the obligation or the sense of obligation that I need to do something with everything that comes through my path.
Okay.
And so I have more freedom because of it.
You just said something that hits a key thing, though. I mentioned I mentioned I live with urgency, anxiousness, overwhelm, control. It's all based off of some sort of fear. What you just said, not intentionally, probably hits on what that fear is. I mean, this is shit that goes back to that childhood hurt, whatever that happens to be for everyone. You said, I don't let outside influences control me. Because of my, without getting into it, but because of my childhood hurt, and you know this, but I'm going to share with the world, I have developed coping and survival mechanisms. Those coping mechanisms are my focus is an outward focus. When I truly know and believe that anything we need, that everything we need comes from within. It's not what you're never going to get what you need out there. It's always going to be in here. Nevertheless, my coping mechanism throughout my life has been various forms of survival, which it is for anybody. But those particular forms are people pleasing, caring what others think, becoming a chameleon so I can fit in, not feeling like I belong, so doing whatever I had to do to feel like I belong. And there's a whole bunch of other ones, and they will come up, and I just can't remember the list. But you don't let outside influences affect you or determine what you're going to do or blah, 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 blah. I feel like one of the things that has really still got a hold on me is that control and the anxiety and the overwhelm that I feel. And it comes from something like I know with like therapy, it's looking backwards. We're like going to get to the bottom of it. Why? Because your dad left and you're feeling abandoned and you just didn't feel like you were good enough and you had to kiss everyone's ass so they can like you. But I presented like this thing where I'm like, I live with this urgency, this anxiety, and I'm putting it on everyone around me. And I like, even now, like I repeat things like even hanging out with my friend, it's like, how many fucking times do I have to say, like, for my own comfort, like we can't even be together, or nor can that person feel like they can really sink in with me and flow with me, because I'm like, I got coaching tomorrow. I gotta make sure I'm done by 12. Gotta make sure I get home by 12. You know, it's like I'm like repeating things because I have this fear that this person is going to be displeased, like they're going to be unhappy with me. They're not there. So it's carrying what this other person thinks over what is right for me. Like, no, I fucking need to get home, get a good night's rest, not have more than 2 beers or glasses of wine, and get up, because the coaching is what's important for me. That's what's important for me. But when I'm with this person, just say it once and then be with that person.
Yeah, no.
If we don't get around to certain things, we don't get around to certain things. But so this is what I would like to be coached on after I get a cup of tea.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just remind you, you had about a half an hour to 45 minutes before you needed to be done today.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep in mind on, when you come back, I'm going to share with you a philosophy, and there was she wrote a book around this phrase that might be a good mantra for you. And then let's let everybody know that you and I've talked about what kind of coaching you might initially be doing.
Okay.
And my confidence that when you do this, you will be extraordinarily good at it, because it's, some of the things you have is drive. The question is what are you driving to that makes a big difference?
I hope it's not a heart attack. And
well,
knock on wood, I take it back.
But now I understand where you're coming from when you say type A. And then maybe what you are describing is what often drives type A people is a set of compulsions that they have to serve in order for them to be at the best place of peace they can get to. Oh. And it is externally focused. And we'll talk about that when you come back from getting your tea.
one thing that we mentioned that I mentioned before when we were talking, that I think is good for other people. I didn't really know this about myself until there was a woman and I had broken up, and she's like, look, you're a type A and I need a type C or a type D in my life. And that was the first time I was like, oh yeah, like I was like fucking pushing through, like we're gonna do CrossFit and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. And it's like there was this urgency that I was gonna move through this and I'm gonna like start a business and all this shit. And that I've been on this freight train ever since. And
Okay, well, when you come back, we'll talk about how to prevent it from being a train wreck.
okay, thank you. All right.
And get your tea. I'm going to get some tea too. I'm going to have
It's tea time.
Ginger or turmeric. I'll be back in about 5.
But we have to make sure we drink it like this.
The cup will be too big for me to do.
It's yeah, me too. It's like it's too heavy.
Okay,
all right.
I'm going down for ginger, turmeric. I'll be back.
All right.
Yeah. So I have myself a ginger turmeric. We're back, by the way. I have a ginger turmeric tea. That is lemongrass, lemon and orange peel, essential oils of lemon and orange, of course, turmeric and ginger. It is so soothing. Like, it's really cool. So I wanted to so one of the things before is I don't allow outside influences, was one of the things I said before. But I want to be a little bit like, it's not like I just ignore the rest of the world.
Right.
What I don't let happen is that let others own my journey. I get to select how I'm going to respond. And response is another thing, is there's a difference between being reaction based and responsive based, or responding and reacting.
Right.
And responding is about ownership, and reacting is about being affected or influenced by the forces that are around you. And so
you don't let others control your space.
Right. And it's not to say it's outside of the question that, like, for, there are cases where, and to be careful about this, is that there is my brother, I'll just put his, I'm not going to mention his name, but my brother can be very triggering. And I look at them, and I evaluate why he triggers me. We are politically very, very different. And it's like a night and day comparative type thing. So you could argue it's oil and water. Yet I've done some analysis on this thing, and it's kind of thinking is that when the time comes for my mother, who has been in some ways a safety net for my brother, when it comes time for her to transition, that I sort of see like the increased possibility that my brother will end up moving that umbilical cord attachment over to me, and I'm like, no, I don't want this. I don't want it. And he's not, to me, he's not rational. He's not reasonable. And he has some beliefs that are not grounded in any kind of logic or facts or anything like that. And, obviously his truth, although I deem it as not very truthful, but his truth is his truth. And I'm not, I don't think I have any ownership over his life. So I can't dictate what his truth should be. But we're not lined up. So he triggers me because I look at the possibility that there will be an attempt to burden me with his journey, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I do get triggered by outside influences, and among them is his journey and his story, and some of the things that I suspect he will go to the grave. This highly reactive, non-responsible party.
Well, you can listen to Wayne Dyer. He often talks about his brother and his brother calling, and his brother called him and said, on a Monday, and he's like, I have a tickle in my throat. And he had described like throughout the week how he's going to get sicker. And that was like, he's like, by Wednesday, I'm going to have a sore throat by, you know, and I don't know if this was the part, but I know, I think his brother, Wayne Dyer, was kind of like, now I want you to try to imagine this. And his brother was like, yes, why? He's like, I want you to try to imagine how much I don't care.
I don't think I've heard this story. And
And I don't know if I'm combining two stories, but it's like he had a brother like that, where he's like, but I get what you're saying.
right. And then the other possibility that there's a trigger is because I describe myself as a former narcissist because of the narcissism as a survival trait. Was in very, very steeped in the early decades of my journey, or a lot of decades of my journey. And I look over to my brother and I realize is that he's where I've come from. And that maybe the triggering thing is I still have work to do. And maybe I should be using the word recovering narcissist instead of a former. I just look at the fact that I've gone so far down the awareness path that I can't be what I was.
Right.
Maybe some of it's still there. Like, so there are outside influences. I just wanted to be clear. There are outside. I'm not inured to all outside influences. Like, it can happen.
Of course, I get that. No, I mean, there's no black and white. So what you said you wanted to share something with me with my predicament. And obviously I don't know, maybe we'll get through this in one day.
No, I don't think so. I think there's going to be a good talk for a couple of experiences.
Right. Yeah, and this is what these sessions are about, and we will continue to have our tech sessions. So we can start getting our product out.
But let's remind everybody that the goal for you here is to take this passion you have for serving others, and for you to actually have a constructive, sustainable, effective business serving others with the coaching. And we've already discussed offline the fact that this narrative we're having today will be a part of your platform, because the way we serve people is talking about framing the guidance for other people's journeys around that which we know. Some of it will be certifications and other things like that. The other part about this process, though, is going to be our journey has taught us certain things. So for your purposes, you've got nearly 5 decades of research.
Yeah, that
will be an important part of how you guide or coach people through their journeys, and what you will attract will be associated with that. Most of my clients are victims of narcissists. So it's very interesting that as I was doing all this work, I suddenly go, oh my gosh, I've done what that guy did. And and their spouse or girlfriend or whatever, that's my client. I've done what that guy, that's where I started to realize I had never put a label on how my journey had shaped in its initial years. But I said, oh gosh. And I do have 2 clients, men, who are in the narcissistic spectrum, and they're a bit more challenging to serve, and yet they're slowly getting it. So,
oh, good for them.
Yeah, but so your work will be very likely oriented around this letting go thing.
Yeah, and I just, you asked me about the whole like control, like if you didn't have anything you had to answer to, basically, if you just had total freedom. And if this part, that if I can move gracefully through the overabundance of responsibility that has to be taken on within life, I will have total freedom. And it doesn't mean that I have freedom from, taking care of a son, paying my bills, taking the car to get the tires fixed. But I will have freedom from myself. I will have freedom from that part of myself that is trying to control my situation, that is living in a state of anxiety and anxiousness.
Right.
And that to me would be like to have freedom from those things that are coming from me. Like,
Well, I
yeah,
think we can kind of sum that up in the sense is that when you have developed more freedom from the stories that dominate the show that aren't serving you, you will have more freedom to focus on being a parent, and that
yeah,
you also
exactly.
have a different line of we still have personal responsibilities. I mean,
Of
we're
course.
responsible for our life. We're
Chop the
responsible
wood, carry the
for
water.
right, exactly. And you know, if it was just about us, we could kill with impunity and all these other things. That's not what there's a place where we plug into society with attributes that support this freedom, which is the kindness and the trust and all these other things that we can do in our journeys that make us just better human beings, not just for ourselves but for others. And I will and for others. And I will stress that everything we do is an all direction thing. So if we operate in a place of fear and overwhelm and anxiety and worry and all these other things over here, and and the not haves and the worthiness, then we're serving that up to everybody around us. As you just illustrated earlier in the conversation, is that you kind of other people go like, well, the one person you describes is like, I want a type C or D person, not a type A person. And then, maybe your son doesn't get the same level of attention because of your checklist that you would if you had just spent time with him in another way.
Right.
So the idea is that those kinds of impacts, when you develop this other thing, which is the let go model, it doesn't mean you let go of everything. You still pay your bills. You still are, have responsibilities, relationship responsibilities, chief among them. And
well, relationship with myself is
that goes back to something very, very important. If you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, you cannot have a healthy relationship with others.
Yeah.
If you are not kind to yourself, you cannot be adequately kind to others. But it's also the other thing. So if you can't be kind to others, you cannot be adequately kind to yourself. It's an all direction thing. So where we are neglectful, it spreads around. Where we are inserting positive energy and creativity and flow and love and abundance, that spreads in all directions too. You probably heard me say this before. It's like, you've got parental unit or units, you've got progeny unit, and then other people in your current journey who are swirling around you in as friends and family and loved ones of sorts or various kinds of sorts. And is that when we heal ourselves, we will extend healing energy to all directions as well. And I say that with utter confidence. The personal data is there. I've seen it over and over and over again. Is that as you work on yourself, especially the closer to the core of who you are you get, the more you are able to serve people around you without that curated external people pleasing or all those other affectations you just described earlier.
Yeah.
So it's everything we do is all direction. The question is what are we doing that serves, or what are we doing that hinders service? Here endeth the sermon.
So do you want me to, is that a question you're asking?
Not
me?
No.
Okay,
I mean,
I
maybe it was a rhetorical. I did ask a question, but it was just kind of rhetorical. But
so where do we go?
Well, okay. So I wanted to share with you something that it's not mine in terms of, I've heard it. It actually has some beauty to it. I don't think it's yours per se, although it could be. Because I think we had another thing we talked about that might be a phrase that's a little similar to this, but it's more pertinent to the way people think in the world. But it's the she wrote a book around this, and I think I can get you. I'll ask her if I can send you a copy of the book. Let Go, Let God.
Oh, okay. That's good.
The idea is that the tighter we're wound around the things that we do that are focused on our, whether it's anxiety or other traumas and things that serve those anxieties, it hinders our relationship with the universe. And since we are the universe in so many ways, we're hindering the universe again in all directions. So and it's not impossible for people who are hugely stuck in survival mode to not do some development. I watched through the lens of of my father's journey, that in the end, I didn't know the man that was discussed at his memorial service that people had known for the 5 years prior to his death. The man I knew was a malignant sociopathic narcissist. I was, to my reckoning, I was a narcissist, but I was at the other end of the spectrum of narcissism. So I had the ability to develop awareness and step out of that path. But I was definitely a survival person, and so was he. Yet there was room to see how, and again, maybe it was some people pleasing and other things, but some of the stories that were shared with me led me to believe that he was having a kind of awakening about how his journey had turned out differently. In the end, it turned out differently than he was on a track for during the first 60 years of his life, if that makes any sense. In his case, the awakening came with illness.
We discussed that.
So, and, talking about illness, right? We have emotional and mental health considerations in our journeys. And I would argue that our physical illnesses are very deeply attached to our emotional and mental status. So another reason for us to make sure that we're doing personal development and I know you know this, so I'm just going to speaking to the world at the moment. The other reason for us to do that work is so that we can, we have the longevity to develop a wisdom legacy. Unfortunately, very few of us are born with wisdom. We have a kind of inner wisdom of sorts, which is beautiful, based on love and things that we're born with. But life kind of steps all over that for a little while, and then we need to learn to get through those wonky patterns and lessons that seem to keep following us, and in the process we develop our wisdom, and in our wisdom then we can share with the world our wisdom, and hopefully, ideally, there are people out there who will go, I heard their story and I'm learning from it, so I don't make the same mistake. And it's not easy for people to learn from other people's stories.
No,
it's challenging mostly because of this word trust. So many things happen in people's lives that they just don't trust. And it doesn't matter how good the story is. I don't trust the story because it's not mine. So, okay. So let go, let God, maybe almost kind of a homework assignment.
Okay. Let me get my paper. As you were talking, I just want to share this. I have some of my curtains drawn to prevent my face from being translucent. I don't know, it's something really, I saw something out the window that really touched me, and I don't think it has anything to do with this. It's just just one of those things you see. But there was out here on the West Coast, which I'm sure it's pretty much a problem everywhere, but there's a rampant issue with homelessness here. It's gotten so bad in the past 20 years. It's just Seattle's was, when we lived in Seattle, it was a massive issue, and I just see it in California. But so it's not something that is an unusual thing to see as homeless people, people who are not mentally well and whatnot. And I don't know. My heart kind of went out to this guy who just kind of walked down the street. And the only thing he was carrying, it was very obvious he was a most likely a homeless person. The only thing he was carrying was a blanket and a teddy bear. And it really touched me.
Mhm. Wouldn't it be interesting though, if that they're in their most mentally healthy place because they have decoupled from also so many other kinds of societally based burdens? That I mean, because I have had conversations with people who are home challenged, and it's often a choice that they
It's a
just
better
go,
way of saying it, home challenge,
yeah,
whatever. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I get, you know, homeless is a phrase we're used to for so long, you know, but it's really, and a lot of reasons why is because the home wasn't serving them. That everything they ever had that was a home was just making things worse.
yeah,
And so often the reason why they just, and it's not just the home, it's just all the accoutrements, all the trappings, if you want to call it that, of of what popularly is called success, actually can make people very ill. And show me somebody who's only lived a life about money, and I will say that that's a person who's deep down inside, probably, likely not, I can't guarantee it, but likely very unhappy.
yeah, of course.
It's not to say you can't have wealth and have happiness and be spiritual or all those other things. There are examples in our society where that's true. In some cases, well, anyway, without going to naming celebrities that might be examples and such like that, but Jim Carrey comes to mind, by the way, somebody who's really been working on themselves, even though they originally were driven by money.
Yeah,
They began to realize that all the money in the world can't buy happiness. Old girlfriend of mine used to say, yeah, money can't buy happiness, but you can sure cry in comfort. Okay, great. That was a funny response to this.
I've heard similar things.
Yeah. But and ultimately though is that comfort can be our enemy in terms of our ability to learn and move through things.
Oh yeah, that is a great place to be stagnant in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not to say you should not have like moments of like maybe plateaus in our journey where we get a chance to kind of walk on even ground for a little while and things like that. It's just that we ultimately at a certain point when you have that level of awareness, when you go like, okay, I'm ready to receive the next lesson. And then you move into the next lesson, which turns out to be, people think of pain, but it really is just stretching. Like you do exercise and the next day your arms are a little tender. It's not like you took a beating unless you overdid it. So, but all of our growth is just stretch. And then we get to a new spiritual muscle or a new emotional muscle or whatever it is that we need to get to in order for us to actually be more authentic and not let all of these other influences, the stories from our past, however they got there, generationally, genetically, or intrauteral when we were, whatever the case may be, or birth canal challenges or whatever the case may be. Ultimately, all that stretching, the way I see it is every time you stretch and then you can breathe again, that's where happiness is. Growth is what gets happiness. In my observation, growth is what creates happiness.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you're not growing if you're staying in the same place. And if you stay in the same place, it just gets uncomfortable eventually anyway. Bed is nice until you start forming bed sores.
Well, that's actually an interesting visual analogy. Is that that being stagnant may seem comfortable, but ultimately it affects the quality of your existence.
Well, listen. Another bed sore analogy. It's not bed sores though. Another thing I just realized is like would you rather drink water that's flowing or water that's stagnant?
Okay, well, I like that analogy. One of my, it's currently a little bit less support than I'd like to do long term, but I support an organization called Charity Water whose mission is to bring clean water to 700, 800 million people who don't have it, and it would change quality of life and health and income options and all kinds of, because people who are sick don't work as much or work at all.
Yeah.
People who are sick can't go to school and learn trades or other things that will allow them to change their quality of life.
Yeah.
And so clean water is essential. And there are so many places in the world where they're drinking in just infested water,
Yeah.
So, it's a great analogy. And I would like to take that analogy and let's tap into it.
Okay.
So that we can both support Charity Water and other great causes to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
I'd like to just leave you with that. The homework idea is spend more time contemplating what let go, let God is. And then there's a phrase that you and I talked about offline.
So wait, go ahead. What's the phrase?
No, well, the phrase you and I talked about offline, I want it to keep, I think it's your branding name. I want to keep it to you offline. I want to keep it offline for now. When you're ready to launch, we'll talk about it.
Well, when we turn off the recording,
I'll tell you what it was. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to, the last thing I was left off with in my notes is identify someone I can coach. So I have that person. So I'll just write their name underneath, and we'll shelve that for the time being. And then we have new homework. So the new homework is contemplate. Let God.
Let go, let God.
Oh, let go, let God.
Right.
It's not let God, let go.
Right. And what that really is looking at the all direction impact of the positive and the non-positive that we do.
No, I'm not even seeing that. I'm seeing, like, if you let go of whatever your control issue, whatever anxiety you're experiencing, then God takes over.
Well,
the universe.
Yeah, but don't forget you have that connection,
Right.
the overlap. So that's why I'm saying things are all direction.
When
you're able to do this let go thing, when you're able to, first of all, just doing this as an intellectual exercise to get you heart lessoned into this, that's maybe going to take it. I've come to the conclusion is given enough time, you can actually intellectualize a shift. Yeah. It just takes way longer. That's why talk therapy sucks. Coaching isn't as good as NLP, hypnosis, EFT, EMDR, all these other things that are out there, because those allow you to have more rapid access to releases that are also permanent, that talk therapy and intellectualization. But in the meantime, this is an intellectual exercise. It's just to start to recognize that when something non-positive happens, what is the all direction linkage to that?
Okay,
and when something positive is happening, see how it fits inside of that, the flow of let go, let God, which is an all direction.
So let's say, start over, start to recognize.
Yeah, just when something non-positive is happening, look at the all direction impact of whatever that is. Like, if let's just say it's a trigger. If it's triggering you, it's likely everybody around you is having, maybe they're not having the exact same experience, but they're having an experience with whatever this is.
So start to recognize when something non-positive is happening, the all direction
impact.
So,
or effect, or whatever phrase.
Yeah. So how it's coming from me and how it's coming back to me.
Yep.
Okay. And then when
there's a moment when you have something where you see it's in the flow, or it's positive, something came easily, felt loving or connected to love as opposed to fear.
Yeah.
Then just make note of the all direction of affectation or impact on.
So when something positive happens, take note,
right,
of the all direction Oh, wait,
It's the same thing. It's just
I know.
positive.
I forgot to write the word all
Okay.
on the first one. The all direction is impacting. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
And
And
then, the let go, let God part is more like recognizing that when you're able to let go, that there is positive all direction impact.
right, recognizing when you're able to let go so recognizing when you're able to let go the all direction.
Right. So the exercise here is recognizing the all direction impact, but then starting to maybe recognize when you, or maybe you deliberately go, you know what, I'm going to let that go.
Yeah.
And then see how it positively affects all kinds of things. Now, I don't
Okay.
mean, and I just to be clear, I don't mean don't make a rent payment or whatever that is. That's not what I mean by letting go. And I think you know that. I just, like if you got 10 minutes less sleep, let it go.
Yeah.
If somebody spoke sharply to you at work, let it go. If somebody
Cut you off.
yeah, well, that's probably one of those. Anyway, I noticed, I was just talking about this with my daughter. I was driving with her the other day, and somebody just kind of stopped in front of us, and I couldn't tell if they're going to go left or right. They had no turn signal. There was a line for gas. They might have been going there. Maybe they were waiting for a car to move a little further forward, though they had moving room, but maybe they were a nervous driver. So I just, 20 years ago, I would have probably gone, like, get out of my way. I just started talking to my daughter. When my daughter was in a car, let's have a moment,
Yeah.
So in this case, I didn't even have to let it go. I made note of it only because I thought, oh, look at how different things are today than they would have been 20 years ago.
Right.
I was not giving any energy at all to the fact that I was stopped. It's like my life did not change because for 30 seconds, we didn't go anywhere.
Got it. Okay, good. I'll definitely, I'm going to put this actually next to my bedstand so I can read it every day this week to reflect on the times where I forgot to let it go. And
Right.
I think after a week, it'll kind of start to take shape.
It is work in progress.
Okay. So let's wrap it up and.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
well, thanks.
so are we at the same time next week? Because I know you
Yep.
have, let me stop the recording and we'll work on that.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.